Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us in today's roundtable, Algorithmic Diplomacy and the Politics of Feeding AI, organized by YPFP Global Branch in collaboration with DCN. Today, we will explore how AI is reshaping diplomacy, global influence, and the politics of information. In particular, we examine whether control over data and algorithm is becoming a new instrument of geopolitical power. YPFB Global Branch connects emerging professionals worldwide who are engaged in shaping the future of foreign policy through dialogue, collaboration, and cross-regional engagement. DCN Global is an international network that brings together educators, technologists, researchers, and policy professionals to examine how digital transformation is reshaping societies, governance, and public life. Together, we are delighted to collaborate today because the topic sits precisely at the intersection of diplomacy, governance, and emerging technology. In today's session, we will proceed in three distinct parts. First, a presentation from the author, followed by reflections from our invited expert, closing off with a moderated discussion, moving from theory to geopolitics to policy implications. So let us begin. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Professor Nikos Panagiotou, who is a professor of journalism and mass media communication at Aristotle University, president of DCN Global, and advisor to the Greek Ministry of Foreign Affairs. His work focuses on media systems, digital governance, and international communication. We see that the piece introduces the concept of algorithmic diplomacy, arguing that states increasingly shape AI training data and governance frameworks in order to project influence and embed political values into digital systems. For today's session, we are particularly interested in the three mechanisms outlined, which are data curation and localization, model alignment, and narrative seeding through open ecosystems. I would now like to invite our author, Professor Panagiotou, to take over the floor. Professor, over to you.
Thank you. Good evening or good morning, depending on what time zone you are at. I would like by starting by thanking actually for the kind invitation, and also would like to thank the network for co-organizing together, the Young Diplomats Network for co-organizing this meeting, and also for inviting us to present the findings of a recent publication for us as DCN Global, and for me personally as a professor. This research, it is the result, I'm sorry, I'm having a trouble with my voice, but I was afraid that I couldn't make it today. We have been planning that over than a month, and things happen whenever you don't want to happen. But anyhow, um, so it results actually of a research, and also a part of a question that we were working together with Ioannis Tzortzis, with whom we co-written the article. So I will start my presentation. I have some slides based on actually on the main elements of our article, and just give me a minute only just to share my screen. Okay, here we go. So I think that you can see my screen. So the title of our article, it is about feeding the algorithm. At the center of our actually of our article stands the notion that now we are witnessing a new kind of antagonism, a new geopolitics that takes hands together with the traditional way of competition, but now mostly there is a competition among knowledge. So the main assumption of the article is that whoever shapes the training data shapes the horizon of knowledge. this article of what I will present today is complemented by a recent publication of mine in Times of India that I had the honor to be published in Times of India, which is among the world's oldest newspapers, and where I actually argue about AI knowledge gap. The main argument there and the main argument here it is that what we are witnessing it is that people will rely more and more on what they will be fed by the algorithm or what they will find through AI. This will create a gap in knowledge because for a percentage of the population, it means that they will totally rely upon AI. So whoever shapes the training data shapes the horizon of knowledge and understanding. The core argument of our article is that AI is not a neutral infrastructure. Training data became a geopolitical resource, and the nations, taking into account what is happening now in the Middle East and in the world in general, they do continue to compete over territory, military power, or even media narratives, as we have seen now with the war in Iran. Among the first targets that have been hit were the Iranian news agency. But this actually refers to an older paradigm. Now, nations are fighting over data sets, alignment protocols, but most importantly, are algorithmic standards. It is as it has been said immediately after the inauguration of President Trump that there is a new competition taking over, the race of AI.
Professor, I'm so sorry
Professor,
to
yeah.
interrupt. Would you be able to increase the screen size because we are unable to?
Yes. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
No. Thank you. Okay, I will do it like that. It is much better now, isn't it?
Yes, thank
Yes,
you.
great. Thank you. So mostly nations are competing over data sets, alignment protocols, and most importantly, algorithmic standards. So this constitutes a structural shift. What it constitutes in 20th century a control of broadcast, propaganda, and message framing, as well as investing in media empires. Now there is a shift. Now, who will control the data sets upon which AI will be trained? Who will control the relevant protocols? Who and under which or no restrictions we will have a model training? But most importantly, upon the epistemic infrastructures that they will define actually the pace and the element upon upon the algorithmic competition. Having said that, we know that AI systems, they frame reality at a scale. More and more we are witnessing that. And just to give you actually a very distinct example, it is the fact that more and more media conglomerates, they are witnessing that most of their traffic comes directly from AI agents rather than the traditional Google search. To some of them, they have even reported that it has decreased even by 40% the data traffic that they get from traditional Google search in comparison with AI. So AI systems, they mediate political knowledge. More and more, we tend to rely on what we get as responses to questions that we ask in AI systems. Even this challenge the old notion that I will have to be trained even to attend to a university or even to memorize knowledge, since whatever I want to learn, it is there. It is just a click away. It is just a question away. To that extent, they influence decision making, both civilian and military. We have seen recently the discussions that have taken place among the Ministry of War and Anthropic as well as OpenAI. So this is not just a communication. This is about a computational hegemony, and most importantly, yes, it is but most importantly, it's about computational hegemony. Who will take over the lead and who will be the one that it will actually dominate and train the relevant data sets upon which they will reflect on the questions that we will have. Our conceptual contribution, it is actually algorithmic diplomacy, state efforts actually to embed national values into AI systems. This, in a way, if I can use this example, reminds us actually what it was happening during the early days of Wikipedia, that it was defining actually our understanding of the meaning. Secondly, it's about feeding the algorithm strategic curation of data sets in order to influence machine cognition. And the third important element, it is the epistemic territory that relates with AI infrastructures as contested geopolitical space. Of course, there is a very important social dimension to AI infrastructures, as we have seen regarding data centers taking when they are about to deploy in various countries, and the heated discussion that goes along with regarding energy resources or water resources, etc. But here it is more than important that AI infrastructures and data centers constitute a contested geopolitical space. In the article, we bridge near approach about soft power that now, through these developments, extends to infrastructural power, framing theory of Feynman, which translates into automated framing via LLMS, encoding or decoding that has dominated for years. It is about AI and user interaction. We move beyond the typical notion of encoding and how the user decodes, because it actually, this AI and user interaction gives the element or gives the notion that we are we are the ones that we define in a way the responses that we have. The old propaganda model that has been developed by Herman and Chomsky through the structural bias in data sets through which the algorithm it is being fed, and this is actually a critical element, and data colonialism, which is actually relates with the extraction and epistemic inequality among the countries, and mostly among the ones that they possess both the skill of computational power along with their own population critical understanding of the use of AI. So I think that there is a shift, and we have to move away from media studies to AI mediated global communication theory. Three are the mechanisms of algorithmic influence. The first one, it is about data curation and localization, data security laws, sovereign data repositories, linguistic prioritization, mostly in English, cultural filtering, to that extent that data becomes digital territory. The second mechanism is about model alignment and the element of fine tuning. It reinforms learning from human feedback to a certain extent, since more and more we have AI being trained from synthetic data. We have actually safety filters or ideological compliance, as we have seen that it has been implemented in some countries and especially in China. So there is a shift from content moderation to actually model imagination control. This takes us into the third mechanism, which is what I define as narrative seeding. So the strategic publication of policy reports, research papers, digitized archives, and think tank material. The goal is not just to persuade humans directly, but to influence what AI models learn to consider as authoritative, what they are led to consider as a main element of meaning, through which they will actually define the meaning, with which in turn they will feed, if you allow me, the user. So now allow me to move into comparative geopolitical models that are applied. The first one is United States infrastructural liberalism. So it is a market-driven dominance where we have private soft power, OpenAI, Google, Meta, Anthropic. There is, of course, the English language structural advantage. There is the platform diplomacy, since there is the element of big platforms, and this leads to feeding AI through actually volume of data. We have in China, in contrast, we have actually the algorithmic nationalism, which actually we are witnessing an ideological alignment loss. In 2023, generative AI measures that led, among others, in the prohibition of big platforms to operate in China, or their AI models to work in China. In their ideological alignment, law, socialist core values embedded in their systems. They are training the domestic ecosystems through the vast data that it is produced from their population. And of course, critical here, it is the road of digital Silk Road, that it is used as an expansion element. So again, AI, it has been fed through a ideological discipline that we have seen that is happening in every sector of the economy of China. In Russia, we have the informational autarky, authoritarian regimes, where we have actually a struggle to implement a sovereign internet strategy. We have seen, though, where this led. It was not actually a success, but in many times it has been a failure, as a recent one in order to block Telegram. There is the Russian language insultation. There is a narrative coherence over diversity, aligned with the efforts of President Putin all these years in order to impose a specific ideological model. And feeding, in this case, AI, aims to defend regime legitimacy, taking though into account the expansion or the investment that Russia has been doing all these years and before in order to create this fake news actually industry. We will have to be very careful in these efforts as well, that aims again to build a specific and promote a specific regime legitimacy. Further, in the European Union, it follows a model of regulatory soft power that it is now, to a certain extent, it is challenged. It is challenged because in Europe there are more and more voices in European Union that they feel that due to this regulatory approach, European Union has been left behind into this contest of developing AI. And there are concerns as well, mostly from big techs, regarding AI Act, that I'm not so sure to what extent it will be further developed. The Digital Services Act, the European data spaces, as well as the Brussels effect that in general we discuss about the phenomenon where European Union approaches things through a regulatory aspect that actually feeds AI with norms rather than volume. This actually results from EU cultural history and approach towards the data protection, and that resulted as well, among others, in GDPR. But I'm not so sure to what extent this model will continue to that extent to exist, taking into account the huge pressure in order to be competitive and in order to be among the AI race. We will also wanted in the article we emphasize also about the Gulf states where AI it has been seen as part of their effort of modernization. So uh, in this case, we have seen an Arabic linguistic revival. They invest a lot in building huge data centers in order actually to promote a tech-driven soft power that results as well with what the Gulf states have learned through what I call the example of Al Jazeera. Through the creation of Al Jazeera, they have actually, the Arab world and especially the Gulf states, have managed actually to have a say, to have their voices heard through the media, the traditional or even beyond media systems. So through their element, they feed AI to enter the global epistemic arena and in order to be visible as well, following this model that I call it Al Jazeera model. So what about the global south? This is where we have an epistemic pluralism. So we have a decolonial data commons in order to repeat again what we have seen during the 70s when there was a huge discussion about how they can actually empower the media narratives through the creation of national news agencies in order as another arena that they would fight colonialism. So they create participatory NLP and they feed AI to resist digital colonialism. This section actually results from propaganda to protocols, which actually the old influence is about persuade audiences, where in our case, power, we argue that it is exercised before the message is generated. And in this case, I argue that feeding actually, there are major security implications because feeding the algorithm affects intelligence fusion, military decision making, threat assessment, early warning system, but most importantly, about the discussion about autonomous defense systems. Autonomous defense systems and taking into account again what is happening now, it is happening in Ukraine. And most recently, we are witnessing what is happening in the war in Iran, where we have actually drones of $20,000 against airplanes that cost over 200 million um, dollars. This is actually, it shows another stage where we are, and especially it raises concern about how we will be able actually to regulate the autonomous actually war machines, I would say. So algorithmic bias, in this case, it can escalate conflict. It can shape actually in a totally different way war justification narratives. So in this case, soft power is now intertwined with hard power. It's not as distinct as it was before. And this is my last point where I argue that artificial intelligence is no longer a tool of communication. It is actually the infrastructure of meaning, and most importantly, the one that it will feed the algorithm. It will shape what the world knows. And what the world knows shapes what we believe and ultimately how we act. And this might not be as evident as before, but more and more, and especially in the younger generations, it will be evident. I'm witnessing that in the university, and I can tell you actually, based and taking into account um, the element of AI knowledge gap that it exists, that it leads actually into a situation where we will actually, the one that fits the algorithm, it will be the one that it will in a way influence and affect how we approach and understand the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that insightful presentation, Professor. We will revisit some of the points that you have raised in a moment. So we now turn from authorship to independent reflection. Our invited expert today is Andrea Castagna, Public Affairs Specialist at the Center of Future Generations, whose work focuses on EU governance, emerging technology policy, and institutional strategy. Andrea, we look forward to your perspective on this.
Well, thank you so much for this presentation. I have the very hard task to try to complement something after Nikos touched so many points. So I will try to not repeat what Nikos just said, but I would like maybe to present 3 points today to try to complement and build up something on which we can develop a discussion later on and in future as well. So first point is the fact that AI is transformative. So I know it might sound something that we given for granted, but I think that we already see and experience how AI has changed social media, information, technical jobs like coding. But what I think it's important to understand is that the full picture, the real effects are yet to be seen, especially when we talk about the labor implications of AI. And I think that I claim that no one really has a full picture of labor transformations of AI. Not Amodei, not Sam Altman, not the 100 people that Meta hired a couple of months ago to develop their own AI model. And that's because AI has implications on so many aspects of our society, economy, social aspects, demographics, energy, culture, that to process all of them at the moment, for me, it's simply impossible. And the fact that it's impossible doesn't mean that it's not fascinating to reflect and develop scenarios. For example, couple of weeks ago, there was an essay by Matt Schumer that went very viral. I really recommend anyone to go and Google it. It was called "Something Big is Happening," and in this essay, basically, Matt argued that AI is getting exponentially better across multiple domains. And if we learn something from COVID, is that we human beings are not very good to understand and process when something grows exponentially. Because AI is growing exponentially. Couple of years ago, AI could just do basic arithmetics, and now it's really going much more into coding, and it's getting better at working on software and develop scientific outputs. So again, everything is going exponentially better. But again, what I claim is that the implications are so complicated that no one in the world knows exactly how and which sectors will be impacted first. And the question that really goes into different aspects of society, as Nikos was explaining, economy, sociology, politics, is that who, how, and when we will experience the change. And this is, for me, remains an open question. The second point that I want to raise, that again complements what Nico was saying about the European Union. I'm based in Brussels. I work for a think tank that is Brussels based. I focus on regulations. And I know there are a lot of memes out on the internet that makes fun of
We lost Andreas. Sorry, it's me.
We seem to have lost Andrea.
The article that Andreas suggested, it is very interesting. I don't know if you have taken a note about it, but I also would like to recommend it. It is part of this discussion. Do not consider that Andreas stopped frozen as soon as he spoke about Brussels. It's not a Brussels effect, but I think that rather actually a lag in his internet. So we should go, we will wait for him in order to go reconnect. Yes.
Sure. While we resolve the technical issue on Andrea's side briefly, would you have anything to add on what Andrea was sharing earlier?
For that, the question was for me. I'm sorry, I missed it.
Yes, yes, that was directed at you, Professor.
Sorry, yes. I just wanted actually to follow up on what Andreas was arguing as well, that taking into account these competing examples that I presented, and we actually look at them very thorough in the article. And someone might argue, taking into account what is happening now in the Middle East and also with the recent developments in Iran as well, that equally hard power, it is the one that defines actually our approach in war or in global politics. Please have in mind that a distinct and very important element in this struggle that takes place all across the globe, it is actually, Andrea, please go ahead, it is actually the narratives one. And actually the understanding that we get through the algorithms. Andrea, please go ahead.
No idea what was happening. Probably like the big tech they don't want me to speak about
This
AI.
is what
So
I said, or Brussels effect.
yeah, exactly. You see, the moment you start to talk about the Brussels effects, the big tech stop you. Anyway, so what I was saying is that I'm a Brussels-based professional, so I work with EU regulations, and I know that sometimes they are fun, especially when we talk about things like the bottles or the chargers of your laptops, that they have specific requirements. But I think that, this is a bit how democracy work, and the Brussels effect is really an elephant in the room, because the fact that AI is getting exponentially better make regulations extremely difficult in the AI domain. Okay, there is a bit of echo. It's not me. Okay. So again, like I think the intention to regulate is good, but regulating a technology like AI is extremely difficult. The AI Act, or the regulations are extremely hard to implement because the topic is very hard to implement. Regulations have limits, full stop. But that doesn't mean they are useless. They kind of allow European Union to have its own ecosystem. And as Nikos was saying, like it's a different model that might work or might not work. We will see it in future. But a very good friend of mine once told me, like, you won't stop the rain with your umbrella, but doesn't mean that your umbrella is useless. And I think that's valid for regulations on AI as well. AI regulations won't stop any kind of potential harm that AI can cause, but they're very good to navigate the potential challenges that the AI can bring to society. And looking at the topic of algorithmic diplomacy is really like a very good way to approach regulations, and something that personally I would like to see more in future. And the third point I wanted to make, it was related on what Nikos was discussing about these new forms of colonialism in the age of AI. Couple of months ago, I was in Africa, more specifically in Kenya, and I was talking with some colleagues there that told me that basically the only African language that is currently accessible through ChatGPT and Claude is Swahili, because Swahili is a very largely spoken language. Kenya, Tanzania, and other countries are really lobbying African Union, UN to have Swahili to use Swahili as an official language in the UN agencies and in the African Union agencies. So, the status of Swahili is pretty high, and there is a lot of material written in Swahili that can be used to train large language models. On the contrary, there are a lot of African languages that don't benefit the same of exposure. Another example from Kenya, the Maasai language was codified only in a written form in 1955. So every kind of story, content in Maasai exists in a written form only if it was codified after 1955, which means that basically large language models cannot really work with anything that was produced before because it was produced in an oral form. And again, Africa alone has over 3,000 local languages, and the vast majority of them are invisible to AI and the current large language models that we use. And this is the kind of inequality, this is the kind of gap that we experience. There are a lot of content that doesn't get into the data sets, so it's pretty much invisible for AI. And this is a big problem now, but it's going to be even bigger in future because what is not entering today in the data set won't simply exist because data sets are not just neutral archives where, a bit like they're not the equivalent of Wikipedia where everything goes inside. The things that go into data sets to train AI are made through editorial choices. So every voice that goes into the data set is something that will be preserved for the future. And this is something that we have to pay more and more attention. Because again, if something won't go into the data set now, the risk is that it will simply stop existing in the future. And the fourth and last point, connected with what I was saying right now, is that at the same time, we see that a lot of data sets are getting polluted by AI-generated text and AI-generated content. And just to give you another example, there was a research published in 2024 that tracked around 4 million articles that were fed into Western AI systems, in which then they were used, of course, to train AI, and because of that, over 33% of responses by different models, including Gemini, ChatGPT, and Claude, contain pro-Russian misinformation, and this is something that it's extremely scary because it shows that, again, what goes into the data set is not neutral. The information that we decide to use to train AI can really be used to spread disinformation. And at the same time, those countries that do not develop their own AI models and their own data sets will be more subject to disinformation that will pollute their media sphere and informative space. So we should be extremely careful about what data we use to train AI, how the AI is developed, and what goes into the data set, because we have seen Russia doing that, but it doesn't mean that other big power in the world won't try to do it, especially in local contexts that are fragile and more vulnerable to disinformation. And I think this is another point to pay close attention to, and the fact that we start to discuss about algorithms and how algorithms can be part of a geopolitical discourse is very important. That's why I'm very grateful to Nikos to open up the discussion as part of this event and through its publication. I'll stop here because I have a feeling that I was speaking too much, but I'm happy to answer any questions you or anyone else might have.
Well said, Andrea. Thank you so much for sharing those valuable insights. And thank you for sharing those examples of the language gap within LLMs and also the risk of data pollution used by these models that might potentially spread misinformation. That was very interesting to hear. We will now move into our moderated discussion section. This first segment focuses on conceptual foundations. This connects directly to the ideas of something that Professor spoke about a moment ago of epistemic sovereignty, data colonialism, and shift from traditional media framing to algorithmic framing. So something that he already mentioned. So our opening question for this section is, under what conditions, if any, can AI systems function as political actors rather than neutral tools? I invite any one of you to begin.
For me, I will, since I think that I've spoken a lot, I don't want to over-dominate the space, but I think that AI systems are political actors. To the extent that they're not visible ones as before or as the traditional ones, but actually they constitute a major source of knowledge. To that extent, they define meaning. They define how we understand the world or the political affairs. Just imagine, for example, about Iran and the current situation. If someone wants to receive an analysis or doesn't know anything about Iran and resorts to AI, doesn't that constitute a political actor, not with a traditional sense, but with the element that actually defines the meaning and approach that we have in the systems? Thank you, Andrea.
So I think so. I don't want to sound too provocative because I know that there are different scenarios and timelines. But I think at the moment, yes, a political system can be considered political actors. However, we don't know, we don't fully understand the implications yet. As Nico was saying, yes, for instance, if someone wants to know more about a specific event and ask its own LLM system to give information, we will get something that might be shaped by different informations and the information that goes into the data set. But I think that we will see more and more AI systems that will act as political actors, especially if models will become more powerful, and especially if we will see big AI taking over entire information systems and sector of the economy. So I would say yes, AI systems can be already considered political actors. However, what we're going to experience in 10, 20, 50 years, it's something that won't have any precedent in the human history.
Thanks for that, Andrea. Let me sharpen the question slightly for you. Do you think the agency is located in the algorithm or in its designers or the regulators?
I think it's a combination of the two. So again, the AI that we're experiencing nowadays is largely LLMs. So for those, I will say that the data set and the algorithm is what really matters. But for future systems, especially if you want to go down to talking about AGI and other powerful systems, that's a totally different story. But again, the full implications of that are extremely hard to understand. I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself when I say that the full implications are hard to see, but I think this is exactly what makes AI so fascinating, that we are at the very top of a curve that goes up, and we will experience more and more things that we can't simply imagine at the moment.
Yes, Professor.
If I may add on that approach, I think that more and more what it is actually constitutes the major switch of a paradigm is the fact that um, the data upon which AI is trained, how how the society perceives this data. It's not about only regulating. I mean, regulating might keep actually the discussion into an upper level, disengage with the society, and on the same time, the society it feeds the algorithm with medical data. It waits to receive actually responses about our medical condition, and at the end, we will reach to a point where we will question whether or not we need doctors, we need scientists, since I have there a scientist continue with me. It is a major shift that is happening in the society level, and this is why it is more than important. And among others, this is a critical challenge on how we will involve the society in this discussion. Equally, now promoting media literacy, we have to invest as well as AI literacy, etc. Thank you. This is the best that we can do in order to to serve the society. We should not only stick into a regulating level, but equally we have to be more active, proactive. We have learned a lot of lessons regarding disinformation that Western societies, especially, have been caught in surprise. We shouldn't allow this to happen also with AI.
Thank you for sharing. And relatedly, I have another question under this segment, which is data control the new form of cultural imperialism? What do you think?
I can go first.
Yes, please, Andrea.
I think absolutely yes. The example I was making on Africa made me extremely worried about how data is controlled and how data goes into data sets. But at the same time, I think that the infrastructure is equally important. And for example, we see that to create powerful AI nowadays, you need the right chips, and those who control the chips are more. They exacerbate this kind of let's say chips colonialism, sort to say, because at the moment you can really develop powerful AI only if you have the right chips, and that's something else that we should really pay attention to, because the infrastructure is equally important as the data, and I think the tensions that this issue will cause in future are extremely worrying, because we might see countries, groups among society to fight over the control of the most powerful chips, especially for the models that will emerge in the next decade.
Professor, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, it constitutes a new form of cultural imperialism, but I think that we shouldn't actually compare it with the old approach that we used to approach it. I really like the example that Andrea mentioned regarding Kenya and Swahili, if I am not mistaken. But I think more and more due to how AI is being developed, I think that it's not a closed game or a closed race, that it will promote cultural imperialism with the old sense. It is much more open, but this is where it is critical actually to invest in societal resilience as well. But mostly, I think that what it is a critical element and factor in order to respond to this question, it is actually the fact that how AI is being trained and whether or not we are present there. If again we are absent, if we actually leave the space open to other entities, I presented some on how they invest. I think yes, some of the global south will be left again behind. Thank you.
Also, sorry to jump in. I see that the discussion is on also on the chat. I want to share one comment that from Nercia. Yes, AI systems are politically powerful entities that actively shape political outcomes. AI systems are politically powerful because of how, where, and at what scale they operate, not because they have political intentions. I think it's a very good input in the discussion. Please feel free to share your thoughts on the chat and we will share it publicly.
Yes, Mariana, thank you for that. Yes, to all the participants who are joining us for this session, please feel free to leave your questions. Towards the end of the session, we will be addressing some of your questions that can be discussed by our speakers. Thank you. And thank you again for those reflections. Let us now move from theory to practice. So as mentioned earlier, across major regions such as the US, the EU, China, Russia, and the Gulf states, governance approaches differ significantly. So the first question in the next segment is, who primarily controls data infrastructure in these systems? States, corporations, or is it more of a hybrid arrangement?
Will I break the ice again?
Yes, Andrea, please go ahead.
So I think as of today, it's a mix of the two. And I think that the discussion between the Minister of War, not the Minister of War, but I'm sorry, I'm just a bit tired. So the question between the current Trump administration and Anthropic on how the models of Anthropic can be used in the military sphere showcases how at the moment the kind of we are in a kind of hybrid situation where it's true that big companies have developed very powerful models, but at the same time, politics and government they still have a position and a part and a game to play. So I would say that we are in a kind of hybrid format, but I don't know how stable this kind of format can remain, because again, if we look at other parts of the world, namely China, we see the kind of opposite. So I would say that in the Western world we are in a hybrid format, but if this is gonna be stable or not, it's a big question.
The one I will start the discussion from a different end. There wasn't the notion or the approach that big tech are too big to control, etc. But what we have seen in the recent years, we have seen that more and more the big techs are abiding by the rules that actually state entities, USA or China, are setting. So it seems that in each model there is, in a way, an autonomous approach, or the big techs are the ones that they are mostly grasp or they have access to data, But I think that equally important is the role of the state. I will use a recent example of how UK has handed over a Palantir, a big contract regarding the health system and the health data of UK citizens actually. So who owns this data anymore? Are the citizens? Is it the state or it is Palantir that I used as an example? So it's a very a challenging question. We have seen that the New York Times have sued or have taken into courts actually the big tech, especially OpenAI and Meta as well, if I'm not doing wrong, regarding the control over data. But there's going to be, this is one aspect that we should have into account. The other element, it is what I challenge also into the article. It is the fact that AI systems, our data is not enough. This is something that we cannot understand or we cannot accept. But imagine that billions of people that generate trillions of data are not enough. So we are moving into a new stage where where there's a need to create data in a synthetic way. When we reach this end, then certainly data will belong to big techs or AI firms. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing those. The second question here is, which model, according to each one of you, currently has the greatest global influence and why?
This is a tricky question. If we approach it with a form of marketing, who we know much more, it is OpenAI, ChatGPT. It has even become part of our everyday. When we refer to AI, we usually say ChatGPT. Immediately, it aligns with AI. So, to that, with it, taking into account this approach, it is ChatGPT. But I think that Google has made with Gemini major advancements. We have seen or we have read to a certain extent how it has been used into conflict zones. But I will underline Palantir as the one that it is AI systems are the one that they are actually more really effective and to be noted. Thank you.
So I want to interpret this question a bit differently, and I'm just saying what model is the most influential globally from a political perspective. And I think that the Western democratic model is still the most attractive, and we see it especially in those areas that don't experience Western democratic values and freedom. The professor was mentioning before the Iran, and we know that before the current situation, there were massive protests in Iran to ask more freedom and more democracy. The problem with the Western democratic model is that democracy has been proven to be slower than technology, particularly in the AI sphere. As I was saying before, regulating I feel like AI is so hard because the technological development is happening so quickly and so faster than discussions in the parliament or election timing, that sometimes people question the model, but for me, it remains the most attractive one because it still guarantees some freedom that other models simply do not allow. Again, the big question for our future generation is that do we want to preserve this model? despite the fact that doesn't necessarily lead to quick technological advancements or not. And again, it's a question for the future generations because it depends if the Western democratic model will be able to fulfill what it was created for.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you for sharing those examples and for bringing the question back to a policy level. That was very insightful. I'm going to keep us moving forward so we can try and cover all the themes that we have on the agenda. Let us now shift from analysis to consequences. One concern raised in the article is algorithmic dependency. So the next question is a two-part question. What risks do smaller states face if they rely on external AI infrastructure? And the second part of the question is, what role should international organizations play in creating more inclusive governance frameworks? Please take a moment to think. Perhaps someone would like to start us off.
The risks actually of algorithmic dependency, especially when they hand over critical data in AI algorithm, in AI platforms, I think it is undermining crucially their sovereignty. Because this means that critical data, critical elements will be provided to providers that they will operate under no control. So this creates a new form of dependency that we have never seen before in the past. States being totally dependent from companies that they can actually turn off the switch. So to that extent, I think their sovereignty and it is critically challenged. So they have to be very careful on the way that they hand over their data, to whom, under which conditions.
I concur 100% with Nikos, but what I'm interested in is in the chat, because someone just said that he or she is from Sri Lanka, and I think this is a very relevant question for a country like Sri Lanka that sits very close to an AI superpower. So sorry for maybe jumping into it, but I would love to know what a person from Sri Lanka thinks about this question.
Yes.
Hello. Hi. I'm Upeka and I'm from Sri Lanka. So can I speak?
Yes.
Yes, Upeka, please go ahead.
Okay. So in terms of the question that was stated, it actually is what I was asking in my own words. So currently, as a small island state and a developing country, I feel the current political state is more influenced by China with a lot of debts that we had acquired, like with the current and the previous governments that we had come into agreements. So, and meanwhile, the current government is trying to enhance more positive bonds with Europe and the global north. And sometimes in between those agendas, we also get driven by India as being the upper arm of the South Asian continent. So what I feel is we don't have, as mentioned in the slides, we don't have an act, or we are not aligned with any digitalization process. We are just starting to get everything on digitalization platforms. Like India is helping to get it right now sorted for us through the experience that they have developed the economy for 10 years. So my understanding right now is we haven't pulled anything properly, and next 4 years we are coming into another election, and I have the gut feeling that what you all are saying and highlighting, and with all the stats, there'll be a huge AI influence for the next political leader that is going to be elected through another 4 years' time. And it will be more or less governed by, influenced to like all the general public through AI. So there will be a lot of problems with transparency of the decisions that are, and challenge democracy. Is it democracy or it's AI influence? So that's my understanding.
Would anyone like to take that up?
So I will try maybe to. She touched a lot of points. Maybe something just to come back to international organizations, because I think, especially in the case of smaller states, fantastic question number 6 complements a bit like what I'm about to say. So, especially for like, I think very often smaller states have big hopes for international organizations to put certain standards. But it seems to me that in our current world, international organizations are somehow losing their power to set standards, especially in the technological sphere. And I'm not referring only to UN, but also to regional organizations as well, because the overall global political climate does really favor international cooperation, and this is something that if I could choose, I will change, because I really believe in international cooperation, especially in setting up standards, safety technological procedures, and in the field of AI, share global norms as well. So that's probably like something that I would like to add, but I'm happy to elaborate more, especially in light of question number 6.
Yes, I think that in the era where UN tries to find its way and its role in the world, it is very difficult, actually, I think, to discuss about the role of international organizations. The most important one under the current conditions, I think it is the EU. I don't see, for example, the World Trade Organization, UN, etc. Most of these organizations, in a way, they don't have the role that they used to have, or they are almost discredited. So they will have to find their role in the new world order that exists. It's not arises anymore. So most importantly, taking into consideration the EU example, still have in mind that even these entities, they struggle between regulation in a competing market that no boundaries exist. This is the main challenge. This is the main feedback mostly from EU companies. How can we be competitive when we have to operate under all these regulations and compete with other entities that they are not regulated, they are totally free? This is a major dilemma, and especially since it actually challenges the very core values of existence, since it is totally related with economy. And if you don't have a competitive economy, how can you thrive? I think that I'm not so optimistic that international organizations and even EU will be able actually to balance the field, will be able actually to regulate the big techs. Having said that, then we can say what it should be the response to the from the global south. There is a question from Gabriela regarding the response. So I would actually have to state that states in Latin America, they often actually import foundations models, not only states in Latin America, but in other parts of the world as well. They host cloud infrastructure that it is mostly foreign. They rely on English data, dominated data sets, and they lack as well a sovereign compute capacity. This actually creates an algorithmic asymmetry, meaning that actually there is a repetition of what it used to happen before in the past. So, is it voting enough? No, because we will have actually um, to have in mind that voting is necessary, but structurally is inefficient. Where youth influence can have leverage, it is upon these four elements that I would say. In data production and epistemic presence through, as I mentioned before, open data sets or academic publications, youth can produce actually high quality content in Spanish, Portuguese, etc. Digitalize local histories and cultural archives in order to feed the algorithms as well. It is slow, but I think it is structurally powerful in order to be able actually to create the data sets that it is needed. And the last element, I think it is about policy advocacy and the regulatory pressure that in a way consists of what Gabriela is asking about, how youth and participation in the elections can influence. Thank you.
Andrea, would you like to challenge or build on that?
No, because I totally agree with what Nikos said. So I have nothing really to add. And again, so I think that international organizations, including the EU, will survive only if they will prove to be useful for their citizens and for particularly the EU for Europeans today and tomorrow. So, like I think that's something that we tend to forget. So international organizations are human structures, and human structures survive if they're useful for the people. Otherwise, they are not their destiny is
finish. But
someone is speaking or something, or well, anyway, I think I made my point clear.
Yes, thank you, Andrea. I hope that answers your question, Zupeka and Gabriela.
Yes, very much. Thank you. It was very insightful. Thank you.
Yes, we have someone who has raised their hands. Yes, please go ahead. Okay, I assume that was a mistake. All right, so we are heading towards the closing of the session. Would any of the speakers like to share one last reflection before we move on to taking more questions from the chat?
I break the ice, so I don't have any questions, but maybe a more general comment because DCN Global, but also your network, guys, is a global network. So I think like what is important to discuss about these topics is the fact that those are complicated issues and can be solved only by through a collective mindset. So that's why I think it's super important to be here today with people from different parts of the world, because those are not simple topics to address, and I really believe in the power of cooperation to address this kind of topics. So
thank you, Andrea. You couldn't have said it better. Professor, would you like to add anything to that?
Yes, Marisa actually asked a question about AI, and this is what I'm trying to find out. Marisa, before I go through, Marisa, I cannot find your question. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, she raised her hand. Marisa, if you can hear us, please go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I had a question regarding the previous question topic you mentioned about stability of AI systems and how we implement, and that it would be a big question. And I think that stability in all inventions when we have or breakthroughs in technology or science comes always hand in hand, side by side with the development. I mean, you have stability and credibility at the along with the development of breakthroughs and inventions. This is what I wanted to add before regarding your question. And we have all the periods and all the years, new things coming and breakthroughs. This is how it goes. That doesn't mean that we don't have also stability. It's like journalism, that you have to update all the years information to be informed about what is happening in the world. But it doesn't mean that you don't have credibility in what you write, what you say, or what there is in the breakthroughs or the inventions. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to take the floor and suggest that all the questions posed here and the discussion that it has been generated, I think that it highlights the importance of this topic that has a lot of dimensions such as geopolitical elements of economic dependency or not, economic prosperity. It has elements actually of how we define who will actually structure the day after. And what I'm really happy and proud of it is that this is an initiative, and I would like once again to thank young professionals in foreign policy and DCN Global that I'm part of the organization as well. They represent actually both organizations, they represent the global community, and they highlight what actually these type of initiatives can generate, can produce, and put forward as a discussion. Thank you very much for all the discussion and all the questions posed. I'm more than happy to continue and looking forward actually for the next events. Thank you. Special thanks to Mariana, to Miss Selvan as well, and Andrea as well that participated, as well as Anna Marquez as well that actually organized and contributed the most in order to be able to have this webinar today. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you, Professor Panagiotou. We really appreciate your words, and it's been a pleasure talking to you as well. Do you think we can take 5 more minutes to answer the question in the chat before we head to the closing of the session?
Yes, yes.
All right, we have one question from Augustine. They ask, how is the rising demand for AI infrastructure affecting mineral extraction in vulnerable countries, especially in Africa? And are there sufficient policies in place to protect them from economic, environmental, and geopolitical exploitation?
I'm happy to pick up this one. And the simple answer to this question is no. I don't think there is any sufficient policy in place to protect people from environmental and geopolitical exploitation. However, I think this is a tremendous topic that the global AI and tech community should address more, especially because we tend to consider until very recent times, we have considered technologies as neutral, but they are not. Every technology, the development of every technology has deep economic, environmental, and energy impact that we should always address. And in case of exploitation, we should be able to point the fingers at the problem. Unfortunately, those topics are sometimes they don't raise the necessary awareness. And I think this is a problem of the global tech community. We should be more aware about the fact that each technology had negative aspects that sometimes are not taken into account, and it's up to us to use our own voice to point at the problems and to elaborate solutions, either at the policy level but also at the very practical level as well.
Thank you, Andrea.
If I may jump in.
Yes, please.
Hi, everybody.
I want
Yeah,
to
thank you.
pass the floor to Jeremy because he shared his thoughts on the chat, and it's good to listen to you.
Well, I appreciate you all jumping in and making this space available today to connect and talk about these things. As you said, you've all brought up very astute points, and I think pointed at a lot of these gaps that exist in the space. And that, as you mentioned, Andrea, is truly only what we can point at. To grasp it, knowing what's coming or how this really affects and integrates into our society globally is very difficult. And I would just like to add that it was particularly the gaps in, as you were talking about the global distribution and the accountability aspect in response to the question about the mineral extraction from, I believe, sorry, I'm missing your name, I think Augustine, yeah. Doubling down, there are not enough protections in place, and to think about the realities of having those protections in place, they're being implemented in such patchy manners, right? We're all attempting and grasping at trying to do things independently in national, to protect our nations and our areas. And I do think that this unprecedented time is going to require real global connectivity and consensus, which we apparently don't have the infrastructure to support at the moment. So I think one of the big questions to add to this conversation is not only about the regulatory aspect of trying to contain what's already becoming from these private corporations developing and distributing, but is there another path to developing global standards of model development and integration into our global infrastructures that from the initial design of them is actually empowering and implementing these values that we're discussing today, rather than trying to regulate them retroactively into these models that were not designed to function in these manners. And obviously, as I mentioned, we're grasping to gain control over what has happened, but I think simultaneously, as important as that is, it begs the question, should we also be working on global development in a connected manner to sidestep what we see happening and showcase those new solutions, which I don't have the answers for, but I think talking about them and finding professionals that can probe that question further and start designing with these things in mind from the get-go could be a very beneficial solution. And welcome any questions or thoughts, or if anybody has any knowledge of any companies or organizations that are doing these things, starting to design and build anew rather than just trying to course correct what exists already. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jeremy. Does anyone have any reflections on what Jeremy just shared?
Yes, Jeremy, is nice to see you online as well after Mumbai. Hope that you're doing well. Yes, Jeremy actually posed a very interesting element regarding AI, and more specifically, I fully agree that we cannot sit back. The second element, it is what we can do. I have suggested some thoughts about what we can do, especially with Latin America, etc. How to begin to build systems that empower the values. I think that unless it is done through a very systematic way, it doesn't stand much chances, because after the invasion in Ukraine, after the attack of Hamas, after what many other all these segments of events that followed, there is a growing sense of that nations should thrive through power, so they will have to depend on themselves. So in a very competitive world, I don't think that it will be very easy for states to agree on what they can do. And this is the worrisome element. And I fully agree, Jeremy, on that. Because I feel, and we all share this kind of understanding, that it's not a system like building chips or building computers or inventing mobile phones. It goes beyond than that. We are actually creating elements of knowledge that have the opportunity to a certain extent to be autonomous. So unless there is a global understanding, there is a global, let's say, I have written an article where I actually called that we need a new SALT treaty, as it has been signed for the non-expansion of nuclear weapons in the 70s. We need a similar treaty regarding AI. And this can only be generated in an international organizations level or state level. But for me, the question is, under the current conditions that they are very weak, how realistic is to expect something like that to happen? This is what makes me actually pessimistic, despite that in general I'm very optimistic. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Professor. Andrea, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I share the approach, so I don't really have anything else to add.
Fantastic. So if there is no more questions, I'd like to conclude that we have come to the end of our session for today. I'd like to thank our speakers for an engaging and thoughtful discussion, and for our audience for joining us. Following today's discussion, we are launching a call for short policy papers engaging directly with the themes explored in this session. Selected submissions will be published on Charged Affairs, YPFP's official blog, with the strongest contribution highlighted as the featured policy paper. We encourage you to translate today's reflections into concrete policy-oriented proposals. Our goal is to extend this dialogue beyond the roundtable and produce substantive outputs that reflect the range of perspectives represented here. Further details on submission guidelines, timelines, and evaluation criteria will be shared with you by email right after this event. On behalf of DCN and YPFP Global Branch, I thank all of you for being part of today's discussion. We look forward to continuing this dialogue at future events. Thanks again, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice good evening. Bye-bye.